Hello and welcome to this instructional video on buttons and triggers. For your button you'll want a small brush. Select it, press Ctrl and T to make it into a brush entity, set the class to funcButton. Before we deal with the outputs, we'll deal with the cosmetic options of the button. When pressed, your button will move in the direction given by the move direction. It will move its length in that direction unless you set a lip. This will allow you to change the distance the button moves when pressed. The speed at which it moves is given by speed, and with render mode you can give your button a coloured tint. If you wish to do this, select Colour, go to FX amount. This is the amount of tint. 255 is the max. Then select FX Colour and pick a colour. If you hit Apply and go to the Flags tab, you can select Sparks if you wish your button to spark all the time really noisily, and also Don't Move if you wish for your button not to move when pressed. Back in Class Info, the key values, you can set the sound of your button, although I have found that a few of these don't seem to work so well. Now to the real details of the button. First we'll deal with delay before reset key value. This is the time it takes the button to reset before you can press it again. You will want your button to do something when you press it. For this you need to go to the Outputs tab. I have already made myself a door for this example, but before you can create an output you need to name the entity which you are going to affect. The door I will call Door 1. Back in the outputs of the button, click Add. In My Output Named, select from the list On In. This will create an output when the button is pressed in. Select a target entity, in this case Door 1, and then select what you want the output to do to that entity. In this case we will lock the door when the button is pressed in. You can enter a delay for the output to occur after the button is pressed in, but often you won't want this. Now just locking the door isn't much use, so if we add another output, this time on Out, so when the button moves out again, we can unlock the door. The button will move out when it resets after the time given by delay before reset. To stop the button resetting on its own, in Flags you can select Toggle so that the button will never change state on its own. Toggle also means that the delay before reset time is ignored, so you can press the button as quickly as you like. Toggle is useful for something such as the door lock. Other output options are On Damaged, which means whenever the button is damaged, shot, stabbed, hit with a grenade, the output will fire. Or On Pressed, which means any time it's pressed, either in or out. In Flags, you can select what will activate the button. Touch, which is just bumping into it. Damage, which is shooting, stabbing, exploding it. Or Use, which is moving close to it, looking at it and pressing the Use key. What you can do with outputs depends on the entity you're affecting, and I cannot go into all the possible things you can do to all possible entities in this video. Triggers are useful for causing something to happen when someone or something enters an area. Triggers are brush entities like Bizone, so create a brush using the trigger texture. Select it, press Ctrl and T, and set the class to one of two types, trigger once or trigger multiple. The obvious difference being that trigger once can only be triggered once, while trigger multiple can be triggered multiple times. We'll look at trigger multiple. Select it, hit Apply. In Flags, you can select what will trigger it, although typically you'll only ever want clients to trigger it. those are players. In the info, there is the start disabled option, obviously you want that left to no, and the delay before reset option. This is similar to the key value for func buttons, only here triggers don't have two states in and out. I will have this trigger cause an explosion to go off, because they're fun. Explosions are point entities. Class is N for explosion. You want to give it a name. Explodey. The magnitude is the power of the explosion. Radius override if you want to change the area the explosion affects without changing the damage. Fireball sprite you'll want to leave alone. The same with render mode. If you hit apply and go to flags, you'll want to select repeatable if you want it to go off many times. You'll need this if you want it to be triggered many times by a trigger multiple. You can select no damage if for some reason you don't want to hurt anyone. You can also select other graphical options such as no fireball and no smoke, but you want to leave those alone. You can also select no sound if you wish for it to be silent. Back to the trigger. In outputs, add an output. On trigger, when somebody touches the trigger box, and on start touch, which is pretty much the same, you can also select on end touch, so the output will only fire when they leave the designated area, or on end touch all, which is for when everyone who has entered the area leaves it. I'll select on trigger, which is the standard one. Select the target entity, Explodey, and via this input, explode. And that is the basics of buttons and triggers.